Hello, everyone. This is Bob Pulver. Welcome back to the Elevate Your AIQ podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by my friend Richard Rosenow from One Model. Richard and I discuss people analytics, talent intelligence, the integration of AI in HR, emphasizing the importance of upskilling, responsible AI practices, and the evolving definition of the workforce. We highlight the need for HR to proactively embrace AI to improve productivity and decision-making while addressing challenges like data hygiene and bias. The conversation underscores the growing demand for AI talent and the future of HR tech involving AI-driven workflows, or what we call agentic workflows, which we anticipate will drive significant value and innovation. Stick around to hear Richard's insights on how to best elevate one's AIQ, and I hope you enjoy this discussion. Thanks for listening.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today is my friend, Richard Rosenow. Hey, Richard.
Good to see you, Bob. Hi, everybody.
Thanks so much for spending some time with me and for our audience. There's so much to talk about. You and I never have shortage of topics. And but I thought we could just kick off with just giving a bit of background about what you've been up to, how you wound up where you are at One Model, and some of the extracurriculars I know you help others with, like finding jobs in people operations and people analytics.
Absolutely. No, I'd be happy to. It's always good to see you, Bob. Always good to catch up. So my background. So I way back when sociology got interested in like how do people come together? Why do people come together? And I've really been chasing that my whole career. Had an early career in nonprofit, quickly found my way to people analytics space, and got to see some of the like world's best people analytics teams. So I got to see GE Capital, got to see Facebook, Uber, Nike, Argo AI, and really learned a lot about a lot of different teams. So got to see kind of like early workforce planning at GE, got to see Facebook's team go from 15 to 150, got to lead teams at kind of Uber, Nike, and Argo, and really with a big focus on kind of data and data platforms. That's always been an excitement for me in a space I've really enjoyed. So this role opened up over here at One Model. So I'm our VP of People Analytics Strategy. And that's a bit of a funny title. It's one that I think my MBA program loves because I've got analytics and strategy. What's not to love? But I do a lot of different things over here. So I work horizontally. I get to talk to everybody about kind of what's going on in people analytics, but bringing that into the inside of the company. And then externally, I do a lot of our research, a lot of our community connections, and I get to talk about people analytics day in, day out. And that makes me very happy and thrilled to be here with you today, Bob.
Excellent. No, that's great. I think one of the, as I myself pivoted into the sort of talent space, certainly part of that impetus was because I saw so much opportunity in this space, and obviously had to quickly learn a lot of different terminology, talent intelligence, people analytics, workforce analytics. What are all these different sort of sub disciplines, and why aren't more companies investing in some of these areas? Why aren't some of these teams working more collaboratively together? And I think today I still ask those questions.
Yeah.
I think you've posted about this, talent, these definitions, and without getting into sort of terminology debates necessarily, when you think about that landscape around, talent intelligence, people analytics, looking outside, looking inside, and how these things sort of crisscross, can you give us like a TLDR, sort of version of where you see all that?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think it's funny because like anyone coming into the space new, I think that's the first battle they have to deal with is just like, what is everyone saying and why are they saying different things? And that's part of like a decentralized movement. It's like we don't have like a FINRA or governing body. We have a lot of people trying to figure this out and doing their best. And because of that, we have a lot of different ways that people kind of came to this space. So I think I'm pretty laid back when it comes to the like people analytics, workforce analytics, HR analytics, talent analytics, like a lot of that terminology. I think a lot of that is either nonsense or has a particular reason, but coalescing around people analytics has been healthy, I think. And we've seen a lot of that in the past couple of years where it tends to be a little bit more heavy in that direction. I think though we have seen talent intelligence really start to pull away. I think in no small part to Toby Colshaw's done a phenomenal job with the Talent Intelligence Collective. I mean, he's got a book on talent intelligence, just all the love for Toby, what he does. But I think when we start to think about those, I remember somebody telling me, well, they're the same thing, aren't they? And I'm like, at some point, words have to mean something. And I think a lot about analytics and intelligence in particular. When I think about analytics, I think about with the data we have, let's make a decision. When I think about intelligence, I think about let's gather the information about the world and bring it back. I think a lot of people still have their own debates about that, but that's how, in my mind, those two slot together really, really well. Is talent intelligence people in analytics teams need talent intelligence teams to bring them the information and get them the data and acquire that and bring that back to make sense of it. I think some other people do internal, external, and there's still some debate on that too. But at the end of the day, I'd say give yourself some grace if you're trying to figure out what these mean. It's confusing right now.
How those teams even formed at the beginning may have guided, how much of each, like you said, some of it's really about intelligence gathering and sort of culling through a lot of that data and making sense of it, as opposed to doing, interrogating the data yourself, getting your hands dirty, so to speak, manipulating the data, doing scenarios and looking at those large data sets across, especially a big organization. So I think that has guided, and maybe bifurcated some of the pools of where people are focusing. I guess the way I think about it nowadays, and I admit I'm doing a little bit of sort of Monday morning, quarterbacking here, since I didn't grow up in HR or analytics, but it just seems like when you think about your talent life cycle and your global talent ecosystem holistically, and you think about the need to attract and retain the right people, you've got to look in a 360 degree view, and however you need to aggregate those insights. And I know a lot of this, but how do you pull all that disparate data together and maybe come up with new insights that one particular person or small team may not have uncovered? And what are those? Do a collection of weak signals amount to a stronger signal that we actually have to take action upon? Or I just think there's so much to pay attention to that you've got to start to pull that together, even if the teams are day to day operating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I think within a single team, there's the work you have to do, and then there's how you talk about that work. Day to day, a lot of times you just have to do the work. Like you just have to get it done, whatever it is, like whether it's labor market, internal, external, analytics, like at some point you're just an HR person doing work. And it's a lot more clear. I think it's when we try to look across companies and we try to benchmark and we try to talk about this publicly, that's where people get into these holy wars over the names of things. But it's helpful to have common names because you can find each other. And I think that's been one of the most difficult things about the job market for this space is for people that are trying to break in and say, hey, I want to do data and I want to do HR. And I know what my company might have called it before, but how do I find those jobs at other companies? I think that's been the most difficult thing, is that it creates a real barrier in the labor market. But again, I keep coming back to giving people some grace on this. I think about HR teams that are hiring their first people analytics person, and they don't have the experience of being part of a people analytics team. And now they've got to figure out the name for this thing. And so I think half of that too comes out of that, just HR teams are trying their best. They're creating a role that they hope will work to kind of drive things forward. And then again, you kind of figure it out on the ground once you're actually in the company.
Right. For people who haven't spent a lot of time in either analytics or AI or automation, it all just sounds like, magic maybe, or, non-human, things doing stuff. Like they're still getting their arms around, what this all means. And, maybe they missed the whole, RPA, product process automation kind of wave, where we did try to simplify, processes and automate, steps of a workflow and things like that. I do think when we think about how or what kinds of solutions to deploy against a specific, business opportunity, business challenge, or when we think about how to sort of upskill and reskill people with, these days, a lot of it around generative AI, I do think terminology does matter, because you could wind up spinning your wheels and learning things that you don't necessarily need to know. And I think there's just too much out there to not have some guidance of sort of what to focus on that's relevant to your career trajectory, your professional development, and the work that you need to get done today and that your manager expects you to get done.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. And it's funny because the generative AI that's come out in the past kind of 2 years here has such a gravity to it that it's almost pulled all of the AI conversation into that. And it's funny because we've had a tool as part of the One Model Toolkit for a long time called One AI, which is this, we've had to start calling it traditional AI sometimes, which is almost like a funny thing too. There's old school AI, then there's generative AI. whatever it might be, but it's this like the predictive algorithms, the classification algorithms, these different pieces that didn't quite get into the public imagination in the same way. And that's almost that there's like a more obscure predictive AI that's a little difficult. And once you understand it, there's really powerful things that you can do there. And then the interesting thing I think about generative AI is it's one of the first tools that kind of came with a help manual. Because like you can ask ChatGPT, what is ChatGPT? And it answers you. And it's a tremendous tool to kind of learn about the space and drive that. What's funny though is a lot of the legislation is going after both. And I think this has been an interesting thing too, is like, because a lot of people have been doing predictive or classification, especially around things like resumes or ATSs, and they've been getting away with things that maybe they shouldn't be getting away with from an algorithm perspective. And suddenly generative comes out and every legislator is moving. We're going to see some actual legislation come through, regulation come through, and it's going to capture everything because we know it's not going to be specific about that. So I think there's been some really nice education in the past couple of years about this whole space. And as much as I would like more name definition, I'm glad that in general, people are like, okay, this is a thing. It's real. It's happening. Let's take care of people in the right way as we're working with these tools.
Yeah, no, I've noticed the same thing. And when I started learning and getting deeper into like the responsible AI space, especially when it came to like things that are auditable within, talent acquisition, for example, it was interesting sort of balance because yes, I was trying to keep up with everything going on with generative AI, but generative AI, at least at the time, was not the type of AI, to your point, that was actually subject to an audit. It was something that was doing a stack ranking and it was like probabilistic and it was predictive AI. I don't know if that's, synonymous with traditional AI, but certainly there was this whole generation, at least one generation of AI. And, of course, my brain immediately goes to Watson because I was at IBM when Watson came out of the labs and I saw it being developed and I saw all the different capabilities that it had and the APIs that were made available that leverage that technology. And so, but you're right, nowadays and responsible AI is a lot more than just, legal, protections and what's auditable. It's the whole, life cycle and being responsible by design. So everyone that touches it and now everyone that uses it is also potentially a builder, you're building your own custom GPT or you're going into Amazon and using, Party Rock to create your own agent or Microsoft create your own Copilot, whatever. And so the concept of responsible AI takes on more meaning for more people as more people touch it in different ways. But I think one of the things that is important, going back to if this is affecting everyone, how do you sort of upskill yourself in just the things that you need to know, all the terminology kind of aside, what's the best way to get this work done? And maybe it's an actual AI solution. Maybe it's basic, automation, and maybe it's something else. I mean, don't just assume that AI is here and therefore that's my new hammer and everything's a nail, right? So I think we've got to temper some expectations, and that's part of making sure that people know what to do with it and when and how to use it.
Yeah, and upskilling is a really good conversation too, because I think there's a lot of people that are feeling worried that they're getting left out. And we're at an interesting moment, though, that enough is changing fast enough that if you upskilled 6 months ago, you might be out of date, which is also very tough with how fast this is moving. But I think we're at a point where folk in HR, if you haven't been looking at this yet, you really should. And especially when it comes to the kind of like agent-based workflows and how some of the applications are finally coming out that you can start to use. Because at the end of the day, like you don't have to learn how to build an LLM. You don't have to learn how to build one of these tools from scratch. You have to learn how to use them. And I don't think we were ready to use them before pretty recently here. So HR, if you were on the fence or kind of worried about it, I'd say like, hey, it's a good time to start dipping your toe in, start trying to make use of this, start trying to bring it into your day-to-day usage, because the tools are getting strong enough and they're starting to become more available. And it's a good time to start to upskill right now.
As you talk to companies, are they doing enough to upskill their own workforce? Or are they waiting for a strategy? Are they embracing this, or are they still not sure how to upskill the workforce?
It's a really good question. I think part of my answer is going to be definitely guided by who I talk to. So I talk to a lot of people analytics teams, and I talk pretty specifically to people analytics teams. It's rare that I actually catch up with an HR VP, and maybe that's something I should reflect on. But I'm thinking about people analytics. I think it's been harder to start to use for direct application because of some of these kind of like hallucinations or guardrails and ethics that need to be put in place. I think some of the systems are just getting there. Like we've got our chatbot in beta. We've got some tools that are rolling out to our users kind of across the one model side. But I think about people in analytics, we still have to do our jobs, which is a lot of this like understand, assess, be thoughtful about, and create hypothesis and track what's going on across the workforce. As much as AI is making a difference there, I think we're seeing a little bit more applications in call centers, scaled operations, L&D, recruiting, where you see a lot of this like text that was being generated before is now we can move a little bit faster through text, or whether that's ingesting and thinking about text or creating text. So I think HR teams, it's a good question about how they're doing. I've heard a couple trainers that are making hay on this, that they're doing a lot of trainings on how to do generalized AI. I'm a little nervous for some of those because there's a bit of a cottage industry that's really sprung up, and it's hard to tell fact from fiction sometimes. But it's definitely in full swing that people are starting to talk about getting trained. Whether full HR functions are trained somewhere, I think that's a good question still.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to some of the programs that IBM had put in place to try to upskill everyone around what does this AI future really mean for us, right? And so we've got to really understand some of the basics, but then how could you put this into practice? And I think so some of that was, let's hear your ideas, and if you think it's something that could turn into something for real, it's not just a pie in the sky thing. I mean, be creative and don't be too conservative in your assessment. Let's just hear your ideas, and if you think it has legs, let's try to put a team around it and see if we could build it. And then if you do that, let's see if we could get some, we could crowdfund it. And then if we can crowdfund it, maybe we can put you through a Shark Tank kind of exercise and then see what comes out the other side. But like, you've got to experiment, and it's not just about experimenting as an individual, because I feel like that's been a big focus of late of conversations. Like, look at our individual, productivity gains, and just extrapolate that to, if our average consultant is, 30% more productive and we've got 100 consultants or whatever, look at all the time we've saved or whatever. But I don't know if everyone has really thought enough or has moved up the sort of value curve to look at, team productivity and maybe even looking past productivity, right? Productivity, I feel like a lot of that ties to automating things as opposed to augmenting how our brain works, either an individual's, human intelligence or collective intelligence. But how do we do more on the value creation side in terms of the not just productivity, but how do we make better decisions, I guess, is one way to think about it. How do we inject? Like, how do you really get people to think broader than just elevating the individual? Because it's almost like, and I want to tie this back to what you said before about like workflows and stuff like that. If you add AI to one task, but you leave everything else alone, have you done anything? Have you actually made a significant improvement in that end-to-end workflow? Because now, if one cog is now moving at 10x, but the other cogs are all moving at the original speed, it sounds like something's going to break.
Yeah, I think you're onto something with the individual versus team. And what I've been thinking a lot about recently is that the Apple event. So Apple announced a lot of new kind of AI overlays and kind of consumer-based AI tools. I think that's going to have a big ripple effect to the workplace, because suddenly every worker that has an Apple device has a AI experience that they've had. So whether or not you've gone to ChatGPT or Gemini or these other tools that are out there, that was kind of up to chance before. But this sort of rollout that's happening across the consumer experience, we'll definitely see that bleed into work, which says like, well, I can do this on my phone. Why can't I do this with Workday? Or I can do this on my phone. Why can't I do this with Oracle? And I think those companies will start to see that pressure from the consumer space towards the kind of HR tech space. It's a really good question though, about like kind of team productivity and team connection.
Hi, I'm George LaRocque, and I'm looking forward to exploring the critical trends shaping the future of work and technology with you over on the Work Tech podcast. Now, this podcast is a little different. I bring together industry leaders, innovators, and investors, and we go deep into market intelligence that matters to HR pros and tech providers alike. So give the Work Tech podcast a listen here on the Work Defined Podcast Network, and please subscribe if you like it. See you there.
I think you see a little bit of that with some of like the sales enablement solutions, which is also a funny thing. Like people analytics, a lot of times sales enablement stays a little bit separate. I don't know why that is, and that's something I want to dig in a little bit more because some of the best people analytics projects are around kind of sales and sales understanding, but sometimes sales have their own teams that do that. With like I'm thinking about tools like Gong or Hockey Stick for marketing. Some different like AI enabled workflow kind of in the flow of work of that tech system. I think it's another kind of motivation for HR, which is like, hey, if you don't move quick here to understand what's going on and understand your workforce as it relates to the augmentation that's happening, it's going to start happening in pockets outside of your vision. And so as we think about these different teams, whether that's developer experience or sales enablement or call centers or workforce management that may not sit in HR, they are all getting aggressively interested in this space. And if HR doesn't step up to that and say, hey, I'm going to lead here. This is who we want to be. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to treat our people. I think we've seen historically that business units will run with that too.
Yeah. On like the workflow stuff, if you're going to make a big impact, you've got to have these agents deployed in a logical fashion, maybe even connect to each other. And that may crisscross, different types of solutions. So, you mentioned Apple, and then, if someone's bringing their Apple device into an organization that's, a Microsoft shop and you've got Copilot, I mean, could someone technically build an agent? Well, I know Apple's, still, the ink is still wet on the Apple intelligence announcements, but I start thinking about like, what does this mean? So you've got a team and maybe some of those team members are Apple people and maybe some are Android and then some are on Windows laptops and some are on MacBooks. And like, how do you, like, will these different agents and copilots and GPTs, like, will they be able to talk to each other and connect with each other?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't even know how that would work.
Yeah, what's coming to mind is actually building on that. It's what I'm grappling with is how this forces us to redesign our understanding of what a worker is and what a workforce is. Because I think workers historically were contained to humans. You can get that kind of like worker to belly button count in the kind of descriptive analytics. As much as like RPA was trying, it was not quite there in terms of like the sophistication of the technology to really elevate to that disruptive level to what does it mean to have a workforce. But as soon as work starts getting done by a lot of these agents and systems, and humans kind of augment or they augment humans, whatever it might be, a kind of reckoning that HR is going to have to deal with is this sort of who supports work and workers and who makes sure that workers can collaborate. And I say that broadly as worker and not humans, because at the end of the day, like what you're talking about is like if ChatGPT and Gemini aren't playing nice in the workplace, like how do we make them talk to each other? And like that,
right.
we know how to solve that with people. You sit them down, you coach them, and you say,
right.
play nice and be nice to your coworkers. But it'll be kind of funny to see this like agent-based coaching where you're actually coaching the agents maybe.
I could see someone making a really funny comedy about this. Like with a bunch of digital twins acting like.
Cut this part out. We'll make the screenplay, Bob. That's our next move.
Yeah, there's definitely something there. Back on the like the upskilling piece. I mean, I just feel like HR. We talked about this the other day. Like when we talk about upskilling, we're not asking people to become like data scientists or AI software developers or whatever. I think it's simpler than that. I think there's so much going on that I feel like everyone's starting to feel overwhelmed, and wherever they are in the, AI's coming for my job versus, I can do all these amazing, things, or somewhere in between. It just seems like to get started and to learn and to get to like an intermediate level of working with AI and learning how to use it, like the learning curve is not as drastic as some of these other disciplines, right? And so I think you made a comment around like HR, like this is a prime opportunity. Their average users are not necessarily the most tech savvy group, but you can see so clearly where some of the advantages might be. On top of the fact that HR teams, many in HR already think about compliance and being human centric and things like that. It just seems like there's a really, really amazing opportunity for them to start experimenting for themselves and then extrapolating the value to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think HR's got a great opportunity to be a leader here, especially because like a lot of the things that happen, like let's take prompt engineering for a second. If you look at like how to write a good prompt, you say like, okay, here's what you're supposed to do. Here's some examples of what good looks like. Here's how I want you to respond, and please give me this result, or whatever it might be. Like a lot of these different prompt guides, as you start to look at them, you start saying, hey, that's actually a really good way to write a job description. If you can tell someone exactly what they're supposed to be doing, if you give them clear guidelines, if you give them clear goals, if you tell them what success looks like, they're going to be really good at their jobs. And so what's funny is actually the method of interacting with a lot of these tools is the one that HR is excellent at. HR might be the best in the company in terms of like articulating jobs to humans. And that's really what the LLM needs a lot of the time, is that way to articulate what is it you're supposed to do in human language, in natural language. And so this ability for HR with has that kind of like compliance mindset too, and that ethics mindset, and the kind of like how do workers kind of get jobs done, the upskilling path might be a lot smaller than it was for people analytics. I think this sort of like data mindedness and this data education we've been trying to do and data literacy we've been pushing has been helpful. And a lot of HR has gotten there now, but it was still a break from like, hey, my core job is working with humans in a very human way. Now I've got to go work with data. This move to AI is going to be very similar interactions almost to what HR has been really good at. So I think what's going to be funny is this sort of shift from HR feeling like they've got to somehow upskill in something that it's not who they are, to maybe something more natural in terms of the way it interacts. So I'm if anyone's listening to this and hasn't really dipped a toe in yet, like I'm really cheering you on. Like go on to ChatGPT, go on to Gemini, go check one of these things out, start to play with it. And I think you're going to be surprised at how quickly you can enable and apply some of the HR skills that you've honed.
Yeah. No, that's excellent perspective. I think that.
Hi, I'm Stephen Rothberg.
And I'm Jeanette Leeds.
And together, we're the co-hosts of the High Volume Hiring Podcast.
Are you involved in hiring dozens or even hundreds of employees a year? If so, you know that the typical sourcing tools, tactics, and strategies, they just don't scale.
Yeah. Our bi-weekly podcast features news, tips, case studies, and interviews with the world's leading experts about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to high-volume hiring.
Make sure to subscribe today.
Before we move on, I need to let you know about my friend Mark Pfeffer and his show, People Tech. If you're looking for the latest on product development, marketing, funding, big deals happening in talent acquisition, HR, HCM, that's the show you need to listen to. Go to the Work Defined Network, search up People Tech, Mark Pfeffer. You can find him anywhere.
And I don't think there's any one particular role that needs to be like the gatekeepers or the people that sort of turn around and learn it and then turn around and teach the teachers or whatever. I mean, I think anyone can step up and take on that sort of early adopter, even change agent, evangelist kind of role, whether you're an HRBP, which is probably a great one, but if you're involved in talent acquisition, or you talk to hiring managers or whatever, like you said, I mean, you're having these sort of natural human-like conversations as you prompt it and sort of nudge it to get to what you want, not in a trying to influence it kind of way, but just more in a collaborative, can you help me, assimilate this information, or can you help me sort of pivot, the way that this job description, reads to something else. I don't know. It's a very natural interaction, just the interface itself, that would allow you to, be more effective. And I think the quicker you get started, the better off everyone is.
Yeah, and I think we'd be remiss not to say, like, spend some time upskilling on the limitations too. So like understand what hallucinations mean, how they happen, how to look out for things. I think spending some time to figure out kind of what should be AI and what should be human. Like when I think about hallucinations, one of the funny things, like if you really pressed a human to give you an answer to something they didn't know about, they might make something up. And like very similarly, if you press one of these LLM to do something they don't know, it might make something up. And so even that, I think HR is more accustomed to. Like our subject matter like is much more fluid and flexible than a lot of other functions in terms of what truth is and how to figure out what truth might be within the business. So I think we're primed to kind of look for those kind of like hallucinations and pieces. But it's definitely a like educate yourself on some of the risks. I think that's a really big one. And then I think where HR could really stub a toe, I think, is where if you used it for things that it really shouldn't be used for, which is like when like really deep human connection is needed. And I think we have a lot of that in our jobs, which will stop us from being automated for a long time, which I think I'm grateful for within the HR domain. But that's sort of like, what does human connection mean? What is meaning? What does it mean to have purpose at work? Those things that it's really important to have a human behind it. Keep that in mind as you're kind of rolling that out. But I think as much as you can, pulling in and getting involved is a great idea. Just being cautious is still important.
Yes, I agree. The hallucinations, I mean, everybody's got a friend who's like this kind of know-it-all, right? So you ask them a question and
optimize your business with a Workforce AI Edge powered by Vizier. Make smarter decisions and achieve better outcomes with real-time AI insights delivered to every people leader. Explore more at visier.com.
You don't think they would have the answer, but they gave you something and you're just like, yeah, okay, well, you're not a doctor, remember, right? So there's definitely some of that, and there might be, bias there, just like there's, human, bias in the way that we, either choose to give an answer or in the way that we answered a particular question. The appearance of knowledge is not the same as having expertise. So I think using it with a critical eye, it's not a calculator, and just really understanding where some of its limitations are, I think is important. And that ties to some of, what we always talk about when we talk about, upskilling. It's not just a matter of writing better prompts or, learning some specific aspects of a different, generative AI tool, but understanding that we're all, when it comes to responsible AI, we're all responsible. And again, to your point before, this is HR's, bread and butter, is making sure we're making human-centric decisions, making sure we're making, keeping fairness in mind, and then of course, transparency and explainability and all those things. When you think about, just tying that to the theme of the podcast here, when you think about all these things and you think about the concept of an AIQ, what comes to mind when you hear that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think about, you have to know what it can do and what it can't do. I think that's really important. I think knowing kind of like use cases and then when to stop. We've touched on that a little bit. I think another one we didn't touch on quite as much is what goes into it. So I think about a educational space that I think HR might have avoided for a little while. It's just like, where did your data come from? And what does it mean to create data? And what data was fed into this machine? Because there's that sort of, I picture like a Schoolhouse Rock, that like, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill, like, and then it walks through how a bill is created. We've got to do that at some point for HR data. And kind of, if you stretch it the whole way back to understand, it's actually like when somebody said they quit the company, who did they tell? How did that person enter it? Where did they enter it? Where did that data go? Where did it come out? Do we have it out? And then have we actually extracted it, architected it, modeled it, gotten it ready for that AI? That's an education that I think is still coming. But it's something that data engineering space, HR is still relatively new to that, but it's an important one for AIQ. And I think that's a broader piece around educating yourself around where the data comes from that goes into your AI is important for local decisions around your own company, but also broader ethical decisions around fair use, correct use, copyright, all those things about kind of like the data that actually was used to train this thing. So yeah, I think a AIQ also means data awareness and data intelligence in addition to AIQ.
No one's put it quite that way before, and you're right. It's not to, again, make everyone that's trying to learn AI be, data experts, but it's part of taking that critical lens to say, well, just like if you were going to do some root cause analysis of where something went wrong, you've got to go back to, sound, data, practices, good data hygiene, and trustworthy, data, because that is, the fuel for any of these algorithms. And so, again, I'm not saying that people need to add a whole suite of data courses, but it would definitely be helpful to know, through your company or wherever they've sourced data, whether it's from another team inside of the company, or you've sourced, external data, maybe it's, social media data, whatever. What is the provenance of that data? Because if your data is suspect, and it was, biased from the beginning, then obviously the AI is just going to become, biased based on the historical data that it's collected.
Yeah, and it's something I'd say, leverage your peers, leverage your communities, and leverage your vendors. Make your vendors work on this too. Make them explain what's going on. Help kind of reach out and find out what they're doing there. That's something I field a lot of questions about, kind of data, AI, and how to get access to data. That's a lot of what we get up to over here at One Model, is actually unlocking that full power of your HR tech stack and data. And so we're always fielding questions and talking to teams about it, and trying to share the good word about what's needed to kind of make this happen at scale. Because as a whole, I think maybe that's something that I'd be really excited to share, is just from talking to everybody about this, both from the HR tech as well as the practitioner side. Everybody is moving forward together. There's a lot of community involvement on this and excitement around it and what it could mean for the world of work. So yeah, just to emphasize that, reach out to your friends, reach out to your community, and start there before you put yourself through a whole bunch of courses.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you? I know you've done a lot of work to help the community at large around, just finding, job opportunities around, people analytics and related areas. And how's that going? I mean, I know I see people expressing their gratitude constantly, myself included. I just think it's, regardless of what the economic numbers sound like, there's always a lot of, transition happening in the workforce. And I just want to give you an opportunity to sort of, plug how that's going and what resources people can.
Oh, thank you, Bob. No, really, it's I'm very grateful to One Model that we're able to kind of put that roles page together. And it's something, it's a way that we give back to the community to say, hey, let's make this a little bit easier to get people connected. I think what's really exciting, though, and this really dovetails into the rest of our conversation, is this AI boom has led to an AI talent demand. And suddenly the NVIDIA's, Microsoft, Google's, Apple's are fighting over core talent. But then actually everybody in the Fortune 500 is looking for AI talent right now. And suddenly, if you go back to like, okay, how do I actually find good talent? I have to have a talent intelligence team that knows the market. I have to have really good recruiters who can actually go find that talent and make sure it can land. I have to have a great people analytics team to make sure I can keep that talent. And I need a workforce planning team to actually grow that team over time and make sure I'm making the right decisions from a strategic perspective. I am really hopeful that we're going to see a forecasted kind of wave of an investment in HR around this space. The demand for AI talent, whether that's upskilling with your L&D team or finding, growing, keeping AI talent that's actually out there in the market today. I'd be on the lookout for recruiters right now if I was hiring. If I wanted to get AI talent in 6 months, you need a recruiter today. So I think there's good news happening across the board. And I'm starting to see little inklings of that in the people analytics board. We're seeing a lot of tech companies start to rehire. We're seeing a couple kind of data science and AI roles start to pop up very specifically. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of that from the job board too.
Nice. That's great. When you say AI skills or AI talent, I think there's some confusing or nebulous kind of thoughts that enter my mind, because when I think about, low code, no code, anybody can build their own GPT or whatever. I mean, does that mean if I can do those things, am I AI talent, or are you still looking for a developer who's pivoted from, COBOL to, working with certain LLMs or whatever? So I guess I just want to understand, because you're right, everyone's looking for AI talent. There have been some headlines recently where people are saying, well, even the concept of a knowledge worker is changing, because if I have knowledge at my fingertips now, then aren't I better off hiring somebody who just has good AI related prompting skills and knows, some of this latest and greatest stuff and can learn everything else or knows how to access the knowledge from everywhere else? Isn't that just as valuable as, a Gen Xer like me who's seen a lot and knows a lot, but you don't need to hire me? Or
I think there's a really interesting distinction there. When I was saying AI talent, I think what I meant was that like generating AI toolkits and tooling. So you have a lot of those, like again, like the NVIDIAs, the Googles, the Facebooks that are all fighting over that kind of like someone actually to create this stuff and the researchers around it. Like that talent pool is so limited. So there's definitely a talent war happening there. I think there's another one that's on the horizon, which is this like AI minded or AI literate talent, which is like you can use and deploy and scale operations through the use of AI. And so that would be like maybe a metaphor, kind of like someone's got to build computers and someone's got to use computers. It's like you had the IBMs and the Intels, and someone's actually got to use computers, but then someone's actually got to do the work too. So I think we're still going to have there's kind of an open debate, I think, right now, is that sort of like, will the current companies all kind of get upskilled, or will we see some revolution in some of the companies that kind of get taken over by maybe AI startups that come out of the blue? And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about this AI talent war right now is there's a lot of people that still think they can build it in-house, and they're going after things that maybe were out of reach before to be competitive. So I'm hearing about teams that are trying to train their own systems or build their own tools or create agents, and a lot of things that maybe HR tech was doing before, they're trying to like get started on in-house to see how far they can get. So I think maybe it kicks off a little bit of a build versus buy conversation again in a very new way with these new technologies and tools that we just didn't see before.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, because I do, I look across generations, I guess. I mean, I look at folks like myself, I look at, how my retired parents might be trying to use AI like on their, Apple device, or just looking for, help or guidance. But going back to your point, I mean, this consumerization of AI in a way does affect organizations, but I also think about the younger generations. Like we both have kids, and their, preparedness for the workforce, not just for college, right? But I'm old enough to have nieces and nephews, graduating from college and internships and things like that. And like, that's absolutely giving them a leg up if they know that, how to use that stuff. So I think about how you're right. I mean, there's a lot of analogies that you could come up with. I mean, is it like being a digital native, like knowing how to use the internet and, digital tools? Is it like giving them a computer again for the first time? Like, do I actually know, this isn't a typewriter, right? Like it's an actual computer. It can do all kinds of things to help you be more efficient. So I do think that whatever your professional pursuits, you're right. There's always going to be people that need to build the people that build the car, not just learn how to drive the car. But yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough time though to be entry level at this moment. With or without AI skills, there's a tough labor market. I think as a lot of companies are holding off, they're waiting, they're trying to see what they can do with the AI and the agents. And even intro to one model, we're seeing some interesting things of that kind of agent-based workflows, and some announcements coming soon around that, because there's some remarkable things you can do to really accelerate what we used to do. And I think we're just starting to see the tip of that. So even with HR Tech this year, I'm expecting HR Tech will see some like announcements. Everyone's going to be talking AI. I know it was skills last year. I'd be shocked if we see skills at every booth this year. It's going to be AI the whole way through. But I think it's going to be still people talking about it. I've got a feeling that 2025 HR Tech, we're going to see some really like very new ways of working. That this AI ground up rebuild that companies are either working on or they're going to get demolished by these startups that are going after it. Exciting things are going on in the market today.
Yeah, I would say AI and skills were the top two topics at Unleash, and probably at HR Tech last year too. But my observation, just quickly on Unleash, I would say 80 to 90% of the conversations that I heard or was part of were about AI, but very few on just to tie in the responsible AI piece. people were not generally talking about that unless I personally sort of nudged them in that direction. But
that's good, Bob. That's good.
It should be
pushing them.
Someone's got to do it, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I know people say, well, that sort of underpins all of this, but like you really do need to be more explicit about that. Where are you getting your data? Are you prepared for an audit if you were subject to one? Are you doing things the right way to your point, back from when you pulled the data together or decided to use a particular algorithm or, borrowed snippets of open source, code, or, you borrowed some well-known methodology? Well, is it proven to be mitigating, bias? Did you transparent in the way you're, analyzing that data and whatever? Because once it goes downstream through these agentic workflows and the data and the decisions are flowing to all these other places, I mean, that horse is way out of the barn at that point. And then what are you going to do? So I guess maybe I am the responsible AI police.
Hey, it's a good banner to have.
Richard, this has been great. How can people get a hold of you? And I'll put in the show notes, your contact info, as well as the link to your the job board that you're curating.
Yeah, thank you. LinkedIn's best. Richard Rosenow, find me on LinkedIn, and then onemodel.co. If you're interested in talking data orchestration, data visualization, data science, come find us. We're always happy to talk people analytics, AI, data, and I'm always happy to talk about those things too. So Bob, thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Richard.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks everyone for joining.